Hi, I'm Matt Marshall, founder and editor-in-chief at VentureBeat. Welcome to AI Unleashed for data decision makers. Today, AI finds itself in a fascinating place. Some people say this is one of the more profound revolutions since the Industrial Revolution 200 years ago. Yet for all the hype around the new generative AI technologies, there are just as many concerns about where enterprises are ready for it. Today, VentureBeat dives into this readiness question. Enterprise companies wanting to deploy AI need first to get their data cleaned up, and that takes work. We found that there are certainly some best practices. In the following conversations, we focus on two different cases of companies implementing these best practices. First, in the case of Intuit, we look at a company that's among the most advanced among end user companies that are trying to use this technology. We look at their data stack, their infrastructure, their strategies, and ask questions about how they did it. In the second conversation, we look at a more legacy company, Albertsons, one of the biggest grocery companies in the United States. And we talk to them about how they are starting their journey. I hope this is useful for you, wherever you are in your AI journey. And I hope you can join VentureBeat in the conversation moving forward, whether it's subscribing to our newsletters, reading our articles, attending our events, or speaking at our events next year. We're certainly in very intriguing times. We plan to be there for you, making sense of it so you can make better decisions. Let's get started. We're talking about the best data practices for preparing for the AI and LLM revolution. Joining me is Intuit's VP of Product Management, Alon Amit, who knows a little bit about best practices of data. Welcome, Alon.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Alon, Intuit is one of the leading enterprise companies when it comes to end users of AI. VentureBeat, we've been tracking the enterprise space, and of course, we've had a lot of conversations with you because you've been out there announcing the steps and the progresses in your journey. It's been impressive how you've used LLMs and introduced the Intuit Assist feature across your products, right? This essentially a chatbot for text for users to be able to ask questions and so on across TurboTax, QuickBooks, Credit Karma, MailChimp, your various apps. But the reason for this talk is to discuss how you created the data foundation to do this. And I want to have organizations be able to get ready to leverage AI and LLMs and learn from your case. But first, though, I wanted to ask, how are things going with the generative AI implementation so far? And can you give us an idea of the opportunity you see with AI and the LLMs going forward?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Matt. We think the opportunity is huge. Intuit Assist is absolutely a major launch and release for us. It's out there now in beta test mode with tens of thousands of users. And it's honestly just the beginning. We also don't see it as a chatbot. I think many companies are thinking of generative AI as very suitable for chat and chatbots. We see it as much more. When users come in and ask questions, we can offer them answers with generative AI. We can offer them answers with experts. Even better, we can do things on their behalf without expecting them to even ask questions to begin with. So there's a huge set of planned features and existing features in beta test right now, and this will continue to guide our progress in the coming years. That's not a one-time event, but Intuit Assist is a big thing for us.
Right, viewers will have to go check it out. There is a lot there. We've been reporting about it, but let's go back to the data side. There's been a ton of conversation about whether enterprises are ready for AI and then generative AI, given the governance issues we're seeing, these hallucinations. So, in business, especially in finance in your world, right, you have to have 100% accuracy. You can't have a hallucination injected somewhere randomly. Alon, you've been watching the last couple of weeks. We've seen government leaders meeting at Bletchley Park in the UK, politicians talking about the existential risk of some of this. The White House has announced the executive order to help with AI safety. But you've implemented this apparently successfully, built your LLMs that are saying that they're free from hallucinations. so that you have the integrity of data, and checking the answers so that it's not hallucinating. So you've almost shut down all the risks, right? Can you help us there?
I'm always a bit cautious about saying we've shut down all the risks. Everything is great. Risks are there, and risks will continue to emerge. I would say we've addressed all the risks, and we're spending a lot of energy before we launched Intuit Assist, and now that it's launched, it's not over. I think there are a few things that are playing in our favor in that regard. First of all, our goal is to help people prosper. We have a focus, we have experience in doing so, we have an understanding of the financial domain. We're not trying to be like a complete general purpose AI to answer any questions about pizza and whatever. I think many of the risks are very valid, and it's great that the conversation is going. For us, our risks are in our space, and as you said, we have to be accurate. So we can't honestly relegate all thinking and all logic to the knowledge of the LLM. We developed our models, we train on our data sets, and we bring in hard knowledge in the form of knowledge engine and user data to serve at the time when information is being provided. This is essentially how we're reducing the risks of hallucinations in our space. Again, this is for ourselves and for every other enterprise. We have to focus on our domain, our users, what we need to do, and make sure that we're serving them well.
So, Alon, what are the biggest issues that you're facing now when it comes to risk? I mean, you've solved a lot. So, what are the remaining concerns for you?
There's always concerns for any financial tech company like Intuit. There are always concerns around risk and fraud. We are a target for fraudsters, and this was true before Gen AI and Intuit Assist, and this is true today, and it will continue to be true. That is something we have to continue to study. Any new technology introduces new vectors for attack, and we are very, very diligently watching the space and acting. Another area for us is, of course, the decision-making and choices. There are many, many things you can do with generative AI. There are many things we can do for our customers and for our experts to make them more effective. One of the challenges ahead of us is choosing wisely and prioritizing the things that work best and have the greatest impact on the prosperity of our customers.
Right, Alon. So maybe we can come back to some elements of this, but we're talking about this in the context, the risks in context of that data preparation. Could you walk us through the preparation you've done over the past 3 or 4 years to get us to this place where you've been able to do so much on the Gen AI side and AI side that so many companies have had trouble with? And, we keep hearing these reports about the deployment of AI being quite low, but of generative AI essentially non-existent for the most part. What were the 3 or 4 main things you had to do on that data layer that other companies should take note of?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We are actually lucky to have started the journey of AI and data a long time before the outburst of generative AI. Some of the key things that worked well for us, one was the introduction of what we call the data map, which is a universal repository for all data assets, real-time and batch, that get produced at the company, ensuring that they are well-governed, schemas are registered, owners are known, purpose of the data is known. This was honestly not true 5 years ago. And I think for Intuit and frankly, many other large enterprises, achieving this sort of cleanliness and I would say a culture of caring about data as a product. You can install any number of technologies and architectures, but the important thing is that the developers and product managers and everyone at the company understands that apart from the products that are being shipped to customers, the data that gets generated is a product. It's being used by your team and any other team at the company, whether you know it or not. So instilling a culture of data as a product, we literally call everything a data product, ensuring that people understand their responsibility in that aspect, and building the tools and technologies that support that. It's one thing to tell all developers, care about your data, make sure you're not breaking it, make sure you treat it wisely, but it's much better when you're able to give them paved paths and systems to help make that almost non-burdensome. And that is one of the key things we've invested in. I think we may have a slide that can speak to some of those things. You see the data map registry kind of hovering over the entire data architecture. You see paved paths on the left for producing data. We give developers not only the freedom to build their data schemas, but also an understanding of the responsibility that comes with that, and the tools to manage that as easily as we can possibly make it.
Alon, can you walk us through this graphic of your data infrastructure and to what extent it illustrates, what parts of this illustrate the best practice for harnessing your data when it comes to the enterprise? Obviously some of this is going to be unique to Intuit because of its specific model, but could you walk us through what you think is just best of breed, best practice here?
Yeah, so a few things. First of all, this treatment of clean data as an asset, as a product. Data lakes are ubiquitous. Everyone has data lakes. Some people have multiple data lakes. Some people would characterize their data lakes as having morphed into something more like a data swamp. We were in this position 5 years ago, again. Our challenges certainly are specific to us. I'm not suggesting that our challenges are everyone's challenges. But we've had a very diverse set of data sources. We're a company that grew through innovation, but also acquisitions. We've had completely different systems governing data and producing data. So just throwing everything into a lake and calling it done is insufficient. So some of the things you see on the slide is the central place for clean data and the data map registry above it. You see unified systems for data discovery and data exploration. So whether you're looking for features for your AI models, whether you're looking for attributes for your marketing campaigns, or whether you're looking for KPIs for your dashboards, you find them all in one environment. That helped a lot. The people who produce the data, the developers and the analysts and the data scientists and data engineers, a lot of folks produce data. They do so with a common layer of paved paths. Everything gets registered in the same way. The schemas are managed in the same way. If you want to change your schema, there's governance of how to do so in a way that won't break downstream systems. That's some of the stuff you see on the left. Domain events and clickstream data and batch data is produced using the same governing principles. I think those are some of the key things that have worked well for us and are enabling us now to develop AI models, both generative AI and non-generative, very, very rapidly.
Alon, there's different components of this slide. There's technologies. It looks like there's processes and flow. Let's look at the technologies quickly. The colored parts of the slide look like they're third-party technologies you rely on. I see Amazon, AWS. I think you've bet on them as your single or main cloud provider. I see Databricks, I think, which just has this Parquet and Delta format to allow for reducing replication, right, and data integrity. And you have some open source technologies, Kafka, Spark, and so on. Would you suggest that those are making up the best in breed modern data stack?
Matt, I always hesitate when I announce anything as best of breed. Best of breed is best of breed for you. And I think an endless chase of always having the best of breed and the shiniest thing on the block every month and every quarter is just an endless chase. Those are absolutely the systems that are working for us. Those and others, I'm not suggesting that this is the entire set of suites and tools, but we've absolutely brought in AWS as a strong partner for our cloud infrastructure. We've absolutely chose Databricks as a foundational layer for data processing and data exploration. It's working very well for us. When you do something like this, you bring something like that in. It doesn't take a week. It doesn't take a month. You bring it in. You create the architecture around it to support your users as they use those things. And it's not something you can do anew every 6 months. Those are absolutely the systems that are working very, very well for us. I encourage, I think, every thoughtful CTO and CIO out there to make the choices that work best for them and to continue exploring. It's not like we're done and that's it and we're not changing it. but we will be changing it at a reasonable pace so that we don't end up having our engineers and data engineers in a constant state of migration, which is sometimes something you do see happen.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I'd like to come back to the cloud question in a second, but let's look at strategies. I think you've touched upon them in your previous remarks. Are there parts of this graphic that you're particularly proud of that that reflect a smart data strategy that maybe not a lot of other folks have gotten right, or is it pretty obvious stuff that other people are replicating pretty easily?
I would call out a couple of things. One thing I'm proud of about this slide is its simplicity. When I make the argument that the data map registry is governing all data at the company, that's a bold statement, and we're taking it very, very seriously. I'm not suggesting we're done, but the journey to make sure that data stewardship and data curation are pervasive across the company, we are not resting until it's done, like literally across the board. And that's the other concept, the concept which is not even an architectural concept on the slide, which is the culture and the people aspects of this. Getting a shared understanding that data is essential for everyone, for your products as everyone else's, and not an afterthought, and not something that you produce in the hope that someone will catch it and do something with. Data is a core aspect of everyone's products. So the establishment of this culture, the establishment of a team around this culture that helps support those cultural shifts and education, training, all of those things I feel are what brought us to where we are today and are the things I'm really proud of.
Alon, you're taking all those things you just talked about, right? The culture, understanding the people aspect is hugely important. What would you say are the most interesting boxes, arrows on this graphic? Maybe we could talk about it in two senses, either the opportunity or the challenges moving forward. It could be where you spend most of your time on for good and for the challenges side.
I'll call out two. On the left, you see something we call, Intuit domain and domain events. All systems are encouraged to produce data in real time as domain events. And again, the uniformity of that is key. And it's not just something you tell developers like, throw everything into a Kafka or an event bus. You give them tools. So when they produce those domain events, they can know that those get materialized automatically into the lake, so they don't have to separately worry about materialization. You give them a schema management environment where they can manage schemas, and if they need to make a change, they make the change, and everyone who needs to be aware of that change gets notified. This is one thing we've found. People often are not even aware of all the systems that are using their data, and people sometimes go and make changes, and they don't even know that the data is being used, and systems break. So having an environment, so this little arrow that's called domain events, has an entire suite of products around it to make it easy and reduce the burden on developers as they're producing those domain events. Another area I'll call out at the bottom of the slide, you see data derivation. Data derivation is a generic term for essentially any transformation that's happening on the data beyond the source data. So that covers computations for analytics, metrics and KPIs. That covers the extraction of features and for data for AI models, and attributes for running marketing campaigns. And once again, taking this as a unified challenge. How do we help different kinds of people, different sorts of developers and analysts and data engineers in a low no-code fashion or in completely coded fashion to derive data, and once again govern this so that we know who derived the data, for what purpose. We help people not rederive the same attributes and rederive the same features, because there's a unified data map registry that captures it all and will literally let you know that the feature you just produced is actually already there. So I think those are two examples in this architectural slide where we've invested a lot of effort to make it easy and provide a paved path for everyone to share in those processes and create this foundational data layer that we can build AI on.
Thanks, Alon. One area of looking at this too is the cloud. You're all in on Amazon Cloud, presumably, which is running all of your compute storage, right? Abstracting some of the processing challenges that some companies have if they're really working at the GPU level. Maybe you can tell me, but that can get pretty expensive with AI. We were talking recently with an executive at eBay who was saying how glad he was that they had the resources to have bet on open source and have that open source talent to build their own data centers, allowing them to save costs. And they point to Apple and others that have saved costs by going away from the cloud. There's been a lot of publicity about the GPU shortage that is, that NVIDIA has, and that the price is being driven up as a result of these processing costs. Can you talk about any concerns you have there on the cost side of betting on Amazon?
Sure. We are in the space of generative AI. We are absolutely looking in all directions, bringing in open source model, commercial models, building our own financial models on top of those. Everyone, and ourselves included, is balancing the need for those super large models that can do kind of generic tasks very well, as opposed to more narrow and focused models that can serve the needs of particular domains even better and maybe even faster and lower cost. Managing cost is absolutely a concern. AWS for us is a fantastic partner, and we do have other cloud partners and other commercial partners, both for generative AI and other systems. Again, different companies will have different needs. Not proposing that our solution is the universally best one, but I'm glad that we have the flexibility to orchestrate multiple approaches to generative AI, including with GPUs, with our cloud partners, and with our own LLMs to create a good landscape, a good balance between the needs for the large models when they're called for, and the smaller focused models when they're suiting us best. We've announced an operating system for generative AI called GenOS. And that's one of the key things it provides. It relieves the burden of the developers to even make those decisions ahead of time. There's an entire operating system. You get to choose. You get to try different things. We will be enabling actual decision making in real time for which model to call and how to break down a request into pieces. And that's one of the ways we ensure that information that comes back is accurate and not just relegating all logical thinking and all decision-making to the LLM. So having this GenOS for us was essential in being able to control costs, to maintain accuracy and privacy and governance and all the other aspects of responsible AI.
Yeah, Alon, there's an incredible amount there with your GenOS, and we've written articles about it. It's the orchestration there and the data concerns and treatments are multiple. But this conversation wouldn't be complete if we didn't take a look at another part, which is securing your data. We touched upon it earlier. You're a fintech company with 100 million customers, and there's a lot of precious data and money that you're responsible for or helping them manage. So you're a good target for cybersecurity, fraud, and attacks. Can you talk about the biggest challenges there and how you're keeping your customers' data safe?
Sure. The biggest challenge for us, and I think for everyone else in the fraud space, is the ever-changing nature of the attacks. People are creative, and last year's attack methodologies are not this year's attack methodologies. So we're being kept on our toes, and we have a massive investment into data security, data privacy, and the elimination of fraud from our systems. We're absolutely an attractive target. There's no denying that we are. The challenges are literally this changing nature. We have both systems as AI systems monitoring the activity on our systems and people just watching and trying to analyze what went down in a particular transaction and identifying fraud rings, identifying new fraud vectors. It's a never-ending battle. The foundations, though, of ensuring that data doesn't leak and data doesn't get into the wrong hands, that is managed by, I think, very, very thoughtful governance procedures at the lowest level of how data is stored, where it is stored, who has access to data. We have to comply with regulations such as 7-16, so that tax data is only used for tax purposes and not for other purposes. So for us, this compliance thinking and regulatory thinking is prevalent across the entire stack, across the entire technology architecture. So it's almost like shielding away the kind of the activity of fraud and risk at our surfaces from the very well-maintained and well-governed data layer underneath. I feel very comfortable in saying that we have a phenomenally strong security layer, but that's not to say that it's not a never-ending process.
Alon, I'd like to close with an observation that I think a lot of people talk about needing this perfect data trusted layer before you get started with Gen AI, but I think there's the opposing view, which is to your point earlier, right? This is a never-ending game. You will never be at that perfect state, so you've got to start somewhere. Can you take out the crystal ball for 2024 and give us some insight into where you think you're going to be working most on that data layer to improve it, to improve governance, or to get it ready for maximum capability for unleashing Gen AI?
Of course, the path for perfection, so to speak, we're not done. We're working very hard on real-time paved paths for data derivation that I mentioned before. So the ability of developers to make sure that when a customer asks a question, or when an expert is offering support, or whenever anything happens, we'll literally have at that moment the actions that the user took like 2 seconds ago. We know what they're doing. We know what their context is. That is, I think, one of the key aspects of our work in the coming months. The picture I portrayed around having a well-governed data map and well-governed data lake, so that nothing gets in there without proper attribution, without proper governance. Again, it's not done. This process of locking down the lake is another key activity for us in the coming year, and we do expect to hit very close to 100% by the end of that year. Those are like two examples of some of the things that are happening at the lowest data layer, the level of that level. For the Gen AI applications, that's where my crystal ball is very foggy. Saying now what technology breakthroughs will occur in the coming year, that's very hard to say. However, we are in a phenomenally good place with the systems we've already deployed, including our own foundational language model, that I think wherever this goes, we're ready. It's going to be an exciting year for us and for our customers.
Alon, yeah, fascinating conversation. Congratulations on everything you've done with the Gen OS and the data progress. I look forward to staying in touch and seeing what happens over the next couple of years with Intuit and what we see from you.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Matt.
Thanks for joining me. Next, we're talking today about how enterprise companies can unlock the value of data to gain a competitive edge with LLMs. We're talking with Albertsons today. We're joined by Albertson's VP of Data and AI, Miguel Paredes. Welcome, Miguel.
Hey, thank you, Matt. Pleasure being here with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Hey, Miguel, companies of all scales are working on LLMs, but what we've realized is that even the largest companies, I mean, Albertsons is part of the largest grocery conglomerate in the U.S. or one of the biggest, and so it takes a lot to build LLMs from scratch. So a lot of companies are borrowing LLMs, right? They're renting APIs from OpenAI and other companies, and then fine tuning them. And so, in some sense, as you've said, the LLM game is a little commoditized, and so it goes back to the data that you're preparing and that you're bringing to the table. Can you talk a little bit about how you're thinking about that?
Yes. So as you're saying, LLMs and AI in general is becoming more and more a commodity. More and more of the large companies are developing these systems and they're making them available through the cloud. So it's companies are being able to use these algorithms, these as services, right? And if you have the money to pay for them, and you have interesting use cases, basically anyone, any organization can have access to this type of technology. Obviously, having knowledge and talents to be able to know how to use this and how to create value with it is very important. But the LLM space, where you've got very few companies that are developing these very sophisticated AI models, is definitely a space where most companies are currently renting, as you said, or spending money on the cloud to use these, right? OpenAI, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, et cetera. And some startups that Cohere, Stability AI, Anthropic, et cetera. It takes a lot to develop one of these models. It's very expensive. It takes talent. So I think companies are going with like consuming them online through the cloud, at least for a few things. One is time to value. They can really quickly start experimenting with it and testing it on their data. It's quicker to rent out an LLM from a cloud provider than to build it from scratch, for sure. Second is a lot of large companies already have established partnerships with Microsoft, with Google, with Amazon, with other providers, IBM, who are incorporating into their value proposition, their portfolio of services, a lot of these LLMs. So it's a lot quicker for them, and through their existing partnership contracts, et cetera, to just start using these. And a lot of these companies are being very smart. They're really investing a lot commercially on trying to help their customers create value, because they're also searching for use cases to be able to tell the world, hey, I did this in the grocery space, right? I did this in financial services, right? So there's an incentive for the large companies to actually help out their established partners and customers. Third is the cost of training. An LLM from scratch is very, very expensive. There's a scarcity of GPUs, these processors that are used to train a lot of these algorithms, these AI algorithms. So even if you wanted to, unless you had a ton of money, it's very hard to train an LLM from scratch. A lot of startups in this space are raising money to get money to buy or rent GPUs to build some models. And the last thing I'll mention, there's others, but this one's also very important. It's costly, and it's also the cost of talent, but the access to talent is another barrier. There's a scarcity of talent. There's a lot of people who do machine learning, who do data science, who have studied AI and can do some sort of AI. Let's call it traditional AI to contrast it with generative AI. But the expertise, but more importantly, the experience around building LLMs is not that prevalent. And there's certain spaces and places where there's talent that's been doing this for some time, Google, Meta, et cetera, and OpenAI, et cetera. But a lot of the companies that have amazing talent, that have the ability to do it, just don't have the experience, and they haven't had the opportunity. So these are four of the reasons why it just makes more sense for companies to start adopting and using LLMs as a service versus building their own from scratch. This will probably change as we see more maturity and as the open source community is doing amazing things, as we see how certain guidelines, certain protocols are put in place. I think companies will feel more comfortable starting to test out some of these other solutions that don't have this enterprise ready signal and contracts and liabilities in place.
So all of that is a reason why you want to use APIs to be fast and quick to the market. And as you say, it's one reason why data becomes the differentiator, right? For a company like Albertson's, if all companies are moving the same way. So then if data becomes the differentiator, can you talk a little bit about some of the things that Albertson's is doing to extract value out of it?
Yeah, as you say, data becomes a differentiator in a world where, again, assuming you have the money, anyone can have access to LLMs and intelligence. You're basically intelligence, a certain type of intelligence as a service. The real differentiator is the data you have and the data onto which you apply that intelligence. So I'll give you guys an example. Think about a kid who has a certain level of intelligence, and you give that kid a book, right? And you can give him different types of books. What the kid can do, or what he knows, or the insights he can produce, is dependent on what's inside the book. It's not dependent on his intelligence. We're fixing the intelligence. It's the same kid, right? Let's say same day, He's not in a bad mood. Same intelligence. So that's true for our data, our company data, our competitors' company data, other like data becomes the differentiator. That becomes the secret sauce in a world where anyone can access different levels of intelligence. Probably in the future, you're basically going to be able to call Uber X type of AI versus Uber Black type of AI. You'll just spend more money to get more power, more intelligence. So you'll get like a mathematician from Harvard, MIT versus a high school student. But in the end, if you have the same level of intelligence or algorithms, the data is going to provide the differential insights. What does this mean for companies? It means that you really look at your data a different way. It becomes an extremely important asset that you take care of, that you complement, enrich, that you are spending money to take care of the quality, and you're very intentional into what data you have that other competitors don't have. Because you're very intentional in terms of what data you have on your customer that allows you to serve him or her better. So those are some of the things we're thinking of at Albertsons, and most companies are thinking of, is like, what data do we have? How do we enrich it? How do we complete a 360 data of our customers? How do we sense at different points, different behaviors, different preferences, so that we can have more information to feed onto our algorithms, and not only our algorithms, but also our people. Like this is a very important point. Yes, AI is super important. A lot of intelligence is not embedded in a lot of these LLMs. It's in the head of our employees, of our partners, and being able to leverage that as well is very important.
Yeah, that's right, Miguel. You talk about the intelligence in the heads of your employees, and so that brings in a really good point about the human aspect here and all the concern that you're seeing growing. A couple of weeks ago, right, with Bletchley Park and the executive order from the White House about some of the risks and the debate among some of the so-called godfathers of AI about the existential risk. Let's talk about some of the risks involved in dealing with data from a company like Albertsons, who's probably in the crosshairs of some of this conversation, privacy and so on. What are some of the big risks of what you're doing with data for LLMs?
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think there's risk inherent to the data, and there's risks associated to how an organization handles the data, right? So talking about the first one, I think the risks associated or inherent to the data have to do with the data generating process. How are you capturing that data? What are you capturing? What are you not capturing? It also has to do with bias, which we could talk about in a bit, but it has to do with just like what type of data you're basically collecting, and it has to do with what type of customer situations, preferences, behaviors, consumption, at least for a retailer, you are capturing versus others that you're not. So you might have incomplete data. You might have data that is, not, again, like the quality is not that good. Maybe like they put in emails that are not true or phone numbers that are not true. Then you have risk associated, as I mentioned, how you handle that data, like privacy. How do you preserve privacy? How do you ensure that the customer trusts you with that data? Data is currency. So like a customer will be willing to give you their data if they believe you have a good handle on it. You're going to protect it, you're going to honor it, and you're going to use it to create value for them. So I think privacy is a very big one. And then there's questions around like fairness and like how are you using your data, or how could you be using your data unintentionally in a way that might harm people that you just don't have data on, right? But so therefore you're creating insights that are relevant for a population that you usually serve, but not for others. And commercially, this could be interesting. Someone comes in, and someone who doesn't usually shop at your store, for example, or doesn't shop at your pharmacies. We also have pharmacies, and maybe you provide a recommendation. If it's an AI-based recommendation, it's going to be based on the data you have. It might be irrelevant. It might be even be offensive, or the person might feel like this is like I'm not cared for. This is not personalized at all. They don't understand me.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how you're dealing with that? I mean, maybe a perfect example in the Albertsons ecosystem, because you do have so much reach, is demographics, right? You have one area that maybe it's predominantly white, and there's biases around preferences there, and then there's other areas that are very different makeup. That's the classic example of some of the concerns that you're seeing here. Socioeconomic ethics and so on. Are you dealing with those sorts of things yet, or is that still yet to come?
Yeah, we're thinking about it. I would say not in the space of Gen AI yet, but yes, in terms of our data and traditional AI. I think this is an exercise that every company has to do, and we're starting, which is ask yourselves, what bias is there in my data, right? All data can potentially be biased. Not all bias in data is inherently wrong or from wrong sources. Many bias do come from sources of inequality or unfairness in society, and you capture that. It could be that you just have bias because you're targeting a certain space in a certain community. So I would say one has to understand what your bias is in your data. Again, if I'm serving certain type of communities, my data is going to be biased to that communities. People from outside those communities might not feel represented or might not feel that they're being served well. And that's to our detriment, because if we want to serve them, if we want to sell more, if we want to make them feel part of the community and have them feel that the store is their community store, we're not doing that well. So I think the first question is, what bias exists in my data? And that's not too hard. It's just look at your customer base, look at their preferences, look at your assortment, look at the different things you sell, and figure out okay, where are those biases? Once you understand that, you're in a better position to say, okay, great, I don't have data for these non-customer communities basis. How do you start generating that data? And I think that's where experimentation comes in. Experimentation basically is a data generating process. And you could potentially start testing certain things, testing certain marketing, certain promotions, maybe certain assortments. So there's cases where there's certain communities that are of a certain ethnic background. And we've seen when we have certain product, which is this kind of makes sense, is a no-brainer. When you have certain products that tends to their preferences, their culture, their taste, you see increase in sales. So the question is, how do we actually use that information? How do we experiment? Can we test? It's not that easy because of logistical operations and supply chains, but I think that's something that we need to do if we want to expand our value for different communities.
Miguel, let's talk about the specific LLM applications that we're talking about. So we're obviously talking about data today, but as we're feeding those applications, what are some of the biggest potential applications in the grocery commerce market? I mean, you talked about recommendations earlier. How are these recommendations hitting the customer? Is it a chatbot on their phone? Is there walking the aisle? Is there a customer support application? Talk a little bit about where you see the biggest opportunities.
Yeah, I think in general, whenever we're thinking about the customer, I think the typical ones are always, how do we make their experience easier, right? So customer support is a big one. Anything related to building the features and the products for them, the digital products or the different type of promotions or interventions for them. So anything that has to be with development of engineers and most companies are playing around with Copilot type of tools, right? So that's another one where we're seeing there's a lot of interest. I think another big one has to do with inspiration. How can you use the generative properties of generative AI to inspire people, right? I remember COVID. When COVID hit, everyone was locked down, or a lot of people were locked down. I became very aware of food and eating. It was a pain point for me in the past when I had to go to work and I was thinking, what am I going to eat for lunch today? And this was before Uber Eats and all these companies where it was easier now it's easier to get something to eat. You don't have to go anywhere. But even then, you get bored of eating the same thing. You're trying to be cost conscious. You're trying to be healthy conscious. So how do you use generative AI to maybe help a family who wants to do meal planning, right? And so we have, for example, different offerings around meal planning, and we're thinking, how do we use Gen AI to just enhance that? How do we create things that are in the space of their preferences? How do you use their data, their preferences, generate things that might be a little different or so it's just a lot of it is enhancing current models of recommendation systems and just thinking of different ways of doing things. Another important one has to do with that we're thinking of is, how do you use, and this is in general, how do you use, imagine a translator. So let's say I need to have a low sodium, low carb diet, right? What about I use Gen AI. This is an idea. We're not using this, but this could be an idea. You give me a healthy for me, low sodium, low carb version of a lasagna. I love lasagna. So maybe it'll have like an eggplant version of a lasagna, and it'll auto-populate my market basket. We have a feature that does that based on meal plans. So I'm thinking, like, how can we serve our customer better in their objectives if they want it, live healthier, adhere to certain health conditions, et cetera.
Got it. I see. So predominantly then through the online experience, we're talking about people on, maybe that's the easiest way to find people digitally with these recommendations. So they're in their basket and you see a recommendation pop up versus in the store somehow. Is that where you're seeing most of the action, is through that online purchase experience versus forcing people to use some sort of mobile app in the store?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like it's easier, but actually that's one of the big challenges that we've had is it's easy to push AI, machine learning, recommendations, predictions, suggestions on the app or the web. In store, it's harder for obvious reasons. So we have something called in-store mode, which basically it's at a pilot phase, hasn't rolled out everywhere, but we're trying to figure out how do we serve our customers in store. So you can go on the app in certain regions, in certain parts of the country, and in certain brands, and you can go in the in-store mode and basically walk around, and it will show you where things are, and it'll provide. It's a space, a channel for us to make recommendation. So a very important feature. It's interesting that have people really enjoy online and digital on the app, on the web, is a feature called "Don't Forget to Add." I don't know how many times it's happened to you, but like I'll go to the store and I have a list. My list, you don't usually buy lists sequentially, so it's easy to forget one of the things that was like in third place or fifth place because you went through everything.
Right.
Or you forget something that you really needed, like milk or something, and you like are back home. You're like, oh shoot, I forgot this, right? Or like maybe sometimes even online, you like make an online order, you forget something. So what we're doing is this is more traditional AI. We're learning behavior of people, how they're shopping, how the frequency, the recency, preferences, etc. And we are, based on that learning, we're making recommendations like, hey, we see you're not buying milk. Are you sure you're not forgetting to add this? So that feature was very popular on our digital channels. And we were thinking of incorporating this in the in-store mode, because like a lot of people go, again, like they'll forget to pick up something. And it's hard to do when you're at the checkout because there's a queue many times. So like having to go and get it for the person sometimes will disrupt the operation, even though it's probably the best thing for the customer. So we're trying to play around with those things.
Now you've talked about the large behavioral consumption model, Miguel. Is that what you were just referring to? It's not an LLM, but it's focused on a customer's behavior with foods they like, the prices, and so on. I mean, so you come in and you've got your lasagna preference with eggplant. Is that part of a behavioral consumption model that's built for you, Miguel?
Yeah. That's actually a fascinating topic. We're kind of exploring right now. We're talking to a couple of different people within Google, within like Stanford and obviously Albertsons. And the idea is the following: like an LLM, one of the foundation models within generative AI, which is trained on language, so Wikipedia, different books, etc. But basically different corpus of language, and it learns how to have conversations around like text, language, etc. Imagine the same thing for our transactional data. So like if you look at our databases of our transactional data and you see like this person, this code of client bought these things, these prices, blah, blah, blah. Think of that as a language, right? In some ways it is a language. It's just not English language. It has different structure, different meaning, different syntax, etc. So one of the things we're asking ourselves is, could there exist a LXM, where X is, in our case, behavioral consumption? So in our language, in our transaction data, in our customers' behaviors on digital, what they're shopping, what they're looking at, etc., there's behaviors embedded in that data, in that language. So is there an opportunity to train from scratch an LXM on that? Because like, yes, we could fine tune a LLM on this data, and I'm sure it would be really good. We get a lot of really interesting insights, even though that's not necessarily English, but still I'm sure some interesting things could come out of it. Or we'd have to translate our transaction data into maybe like NLP, like some natural language representation, but we probably would lose information. So this is something we're asking ourselves about, and we're exploring right now.
There's a lot of interesting projects you have there at Albertson's, Miguel. It's fascinating. But now let's go back to data for a second. My understanding is that a lot of companies struggle with getting all their data in one place. There's this Shangri-La, or kind of perfect state where you have all data non-replicated, perfectly governed, right? All the right preferences and so on through the org. And any large company is going to be buying companies. You're going through a merger, right, with another large company, Kroger, is my understanding. And they're going to have a different stack, different cloud provider, a different data setup. So this is going to be not a perfect state that anyone can get to in any point in time. And so I think there's been a lot of focus on getting that data perfect before you work with LLMs, but that's kind of not it's not realistic. So if it's a work in progress, you got to start with data projects around these apps that you're building, presumably, right? It's piecemeal. Can you talk a little bit about one or two of these projects? And I think you talked at one point about generating product descriptions for your catalog, or maybe there's some other examples of some of these apps you have in pilot mode. But how you're thinking about preparing data so that it's good enough for those cases?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone has solved the how do we get our data in a centralized or in a certain state where we can really get the most value at it. I think there's a lot of companies that are doing a really good job. I don't think there's one size fits all approach. It'll be depending on the company. But I think most companies that are smart or that learn become very strategic. They suddenly focus those efforts of unifying, making the data compliant, governed, non-redundant, good quality. They choose certain pieces of their data. They start doing the effort on those pieces of the data, because you have to work in parallel. Like, that is a never-ending task. And at the same time, you want to align those, you want to map that data to the value, to the strategy. So if customer experience is fundamental for the organization because it's going to move the top line, or reducing churn is fundamental, the question is, where are those instances of data that you need to start doing this? And I would say, usually what you want to do is work in parallel. You choose one curated set, a data set, and you start testing and experimenting by building pilots around that while you're doing the other monumental task. We take data in general very seriously at Albertsons. We've set up we have a data governance team, and we're working not only in data governance in general, but thinking of data governance around Gen AI. And so we're basically working around this, and how do we make sure that we're privacy preserving our data, and that we're doing things that will not harm or our customers or make them feel like, what are you doing with my data? And yes, there's different things you can use the LLMs to improve quality. For example, if you have description of things, you could potentially have the LLM improve those descriptions or impute incomplete descriptions, right? Or, for example, a typical case that came out probably, I don't know, some months ago. It was a report from a study from Stanford and MIT on a company that was doing customer service. It's been demonstrated that it really can help increase the productivity of customer service agents when you put a Gen AI tool to complement them. Most of the benefits, granted, were on the incoming employees that were doing customer service, but still 14% productivity increase, which we've seen, is tremendous. So we're also thinking, how can Gen AI, this is a very important point, the concept of AI skilling. How can you use Gen AI to skill, to upskill, if you want, your employees to better serve the customers, right? So I think there's many people who are very talented who might be stuck in a job, and like, it's a dignified job, but still you suddenly give them tools that they can do more and they can scale their impact, and therefore there's more value created for them and for the organization.
Miguel, yeah, there's a lot there for employees to learn, upskilling there on the best practice side internally. Can you touch on maybe the technology solutions that have come out recently, and how much of this can be solved, right? This data data question can be solved with solutions. We're seeing a number of things. Recently, Databricks made a big deal about the Delta Lake and the Parquet tables, being one way to create consistency and non-replication. And Microsoft has jumped on some of that with Fabric, and they had this week some announcements around that. Their general availability of Fabric. And last week we saw OpenAI launch shields to indemnify users of OpenAI from liability. There's a lot of things happening. Can you talk a little bit about how technology is going to solve this, or is that not going to happen anytime soon?
Yeah, no. I think it will happen. It's actually impressive. Last week we saw the announcements of OpenAI, and it's funny. I saw a meme which is funny and kind of sad in a way for many startups, but it was the typical map of startups in the GenAI space. And like 2023 and 2024 had like OpenAI, the only one, because it seems like OpenAI, and this is true for others as well, is just coming out with features every day or every week or whatever that is kind of like solving a problem which many startups are working on, right? So for example, like a very important use case in general for most companies will be talk to your data, right? So like you will want the ability to talk to your data. Go use these Gen AI tools on your PDFs if you're an insurance company, the policies, on the contracts, on your repositories of like inventory, catalog, etc. So I think technology is advancing quickly. I think little by little we'll get to standards. I think being enterprise ready is a very important thing. I think a lot of big companies are a little weary of working with startups because first of all, we don't have the bandwidth to work with. Like we have a certain amount of bandwidth. We have established partnerships. It's easier within contract, within liability, et cetera, to work with certain partnerships. I think there's huge opportunities with the startup space. And I think a lot of the big ones incumbents are building products and features within their products that are just like making life easier. And this will just become more and more is what I believe.
Miguel, this is fascinating. You've got so many interesting pilots happening at Albertsons. It feels like really early days. I don't know if it's the first inning, second inning, but I look forward to staying in touch, and I hope we can talk again maybe next year when we see a lot of these great things rolling out, and hear back on how that data project is coming along. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Matt, for the invitation, the conversation. Thank you to everyone who was here, and yeah, it is exciting, and I would say like last thought is like everyone should be learning more and more about this. It's going to impact our lives, like our daily lives, besides our professional lives. So it's exciting times. Thanks, Matt, for having me.
Thanks, Miguel. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at AI Unleashed for Data Decision Makers. Think about joining us on the next step of this journey for enterprise decision makers when it comes to preparing for the LLM revolution. We've created a special Salon event series called the AI Impact Tour that starts January 13th in San Francisco. So we'll continue our dialogue there and throughout the year, each month with this Impact Tour. And so you can look at the site to find out more information.